and we have a very cool special guest in the studio today, Bishop Cornelius Bowser. Pastor Bowser, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
You bet. Now, you and I have gotten to know each other a little bit over the last couple of years.
Yes.
And we've worked on a couple different projects. We actually did another podcast together. Mm-hmm. And I'm really excited about this conversation. I think that it's going to be, the catalyst was a post that you put on your Facebook page and a study that we're going to talk a lot about.
Yes.
And I think that it's the perfect conversation and the perfect two people to have this conversation, because I think that we know each other mm-hmm. well enough that we respect each other, that we trust each other, that we're coming from a sincere place.
Right.
And but we still know that we come from a different enough background and a different enough perspective that mm-hmm. it won't be an argument, and it won't be well, I agree with you and you agree with me. You know what I mean?
Right,
exactly. It'll actually be a productive conversation.
Exactly. Thank you.
I don't know. What do you think?
No, absolutely. I really appreciate it. You know, being dealing with the gun violence prevention and being that activists out there really trying to reduce gun violence in, especially the Black and brown community. My expertise is dealing with the Black community, especially as it relates to gangs and so on. Doing that work, it's really about trying to make sure that the individuals who are engaged and involved in the gun violence, that number one, they get the support they need, but also make our community safe and get them, right, to get these illegal guns out of their hands. And so many times when you talk about guns and you talk about access and things like that, it can stir things up. People, if they don't understand your motive, where you're coming from, they can really begin to feel as though you're trying to take people's guns, which for me, that's not my goal.
And I think in these conversations, it's important to really drill down and define and explain and be extremely specific. Like,
yes,
hey, what are you talking about? Like, for example, I liked the fact that you said illegal guns.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You're not talking about legal guns or legally owned guns.
Right.
You're talking about the illegal guns that people use for bad things.
Exactly.
So tell people, before we get too deep
mm-hmm.
into it, tell people what you do. You're a bishop.
Yes.
And so tell people exactly, what you do for a living and what you do for the community.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm pastor of Charity Apostolic Church. I've been pastoring since 95. So we're going on, I think it's about 29 years mm-hmm. of pastoring. And so along with that, our church, we have a ministry called Shaphat Outreach, which this Shaphat Outreach is centered around violence intervention and prevention. And so we focus on guns as it relates to gangs, looking at the data in our community. And when you talk about homicides, gun homicides, or gang homicides, I should say, 100% of those homicides, the weapon of choice was a gun. And so with looking at that, what I decided to do is, okay, we want to reduce gun violence in our community. We got to find that small percentage of population that are involved in the gangs, that are the ones that's committing the violence, and try to reach out to them, right, to offer them resources, bring them into our program to change their behaviors, but also to get them to put these, as you would say, those illegal guns down, because, we're talking about all types of guns. Most times handguns, not rifles or assault weapons and things like that. We're dealing with the handguns. But with these handguns, many times they're ghost guns. Many times they're guns that they might have stolen out of a residence or out of a car and so on. So my push has always been, if there's a limited access of illegal guns for these individuals, then that's part of what we can do to reduce the gun violence, but most definitely have to change these individuals' mindset if we're really going to get them to stop doing these illegal things as far as shooting and killing people and things like that, because we want to see the reduction in gun violence when it comes to gang homicides and so on.
See, and there's one thing that's really unique about what you do and where you're coming from, as far as your perspective, is you're basically saying, hey, look, I'm out here working in my community.
Yes.
And there are people that are doing bad things.
Yes.
And the bad things that they're doing are horrific.
Mm-hmm.
They're killing people. They're maiming people and permanently injuring people. And they're using a gun.
Right.
And they're not just using any gun, they're using a pistol. And where are they getting this pistol? Well, they're not going down and buying it from the, gun shop.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
They're not, taking an NRA course and learning how, you know what I mean? They're stealing it. Well, where are they stealing it from? Well, they're breaking into a home, they're breaking into a car, and they're stealing it. And the reason I want to, and those are those steps where you're going, hey, look, my motivation is not guns, you know, Pastor, right? Your motivation is, I want to try to stop bad things from happening.
Exactly.
So when I see bad things happening, well, I focus on a number of different things, like and the reason I'm walking through this is the people who are listening are people who have fought back against storage laws.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where you're going, hey, guys, I'm trying to stop people from getting hurt and they're stealing guns that are not secured or whatever. And we're going, hey, wait a minute. If they don't break into our house, they won't steal our guns. And if I got to lock it, why do I have to be less safe so that the other community, you know what I mean?
That's the argument I hear. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's an important. Now that being said, it was one thing that was really interesting when we were on that last podcast. Is we were talking about how you do a lot of work with some of the gun control groups.
Oh yes.
And we were chatting about that, and there was something you said in that conversation that stuck with me. You said, "Look, they're there. They're showing up."
Yes.
So. You're doing work. You're trying to make your community a better place, not necessarily just about guns.
Right.
Not even necessarily just about violence. You're working with young men and women and whatever. You're just trying to make your community a better place.
Exactly.
And then here you have, a dozen, gun control advocates who are saying, hey, I want to help.
Right.
And you're like, well, great. Let's do this. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that I thought that was a really interesting. Anyway, So let's get to the article. I wanted to kind of give everybody a little bit of context, and then, the other thing is this has been important to me as a Second Amendment advocate since I began. As far as like how different communities view guns and the motivation behind, folks that are working towards more stringent gun laws. Like what's the motivation here? Because it's different in San Diego than it is in Alabama.
That's right.
Or Mississippi. It's different in San Diego even than it probably is in LA or New York or Detroit. It's very, very different. So I've been trying to, but I want I definitely want to put out there that I've put my money where my mouth is.
Absolutely.
With as far as this goes, I mean, we've had our BIPOC shooting socials and educational, lectures. For those who aren't familiar, BIPOC stands for Black Indigenous People of Color. And we've put together a class for people that have, how would you describe it? The class that you and Alicia do?
We call it gun safety class.
It's a gun safety class.
That's what I call it, yes.
But what was the motivation for that? It's for people who...
Yes, that has to deal with individuals that have been arrested for possession of a gun, and they didn't have that right or that legal right to have that gun. And so they weren't charged with a misdemeanor because a felony because they weren't a felon, right? If there was a felony, they'd have been charged with a felony. They were charged with a misdemeanor. And a new law passed a couple of years ago in regards to individuals that are arrested with a gun, and if they go through certain type of diversion, the charges could be dropped. And so that was our carrot to offer these young men. It's like, hey, you come to our program 12 to 18 months, you go through our program, you complete the program, go back to court, then they'll drop the charges. And so one of the other things that was a motivation to these young people is that we were also letting them know that, like, look, if you get this off your record, right, you don't have a felony now. If you get this off your record, then you can go legally purchase a gun. We'll pay for you to go through a gun safety class so that you can take care of all the legal requirements in order to get a gun, right? Yeah. And then while they're going through our class, we deal with CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. We use motivational interviewing. We also use the 5 stages of change to change their behaviors. So by the time they complete the class, they have self-control. They have these life skills to be able to handle anger, their anger management, and think responsibly. And so we take them through that so where they know they have changed their behavior and they really know how to manage their emotions. And at the same time, the charges are dropped, Then we get them through the gun safety classes. Then if they want to purchase a gun, they can get one legally. And we know that they have the life skills to really handle that gun safely. And I've been through the class myself, even though I don't possess a gun. I went through the class. I thought it was great. I really, on the other side, went bragging about how great the class was. Good. And how educational it was and empowering it was. And I learned a lot in the class. So I know that that gun safety class is a great tool to use to help these young men to, once they go through the process, to be able to purchase a gun and be able to have it legally, and yet at the same time be a law-abiding citizen.
Yeah, and you called up and said, hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish. And I got with Alicia, and Alicia did a fantastic job of putting together some curriculum and delivering the class. Alicia, have the classes been?
They've been fantastic. So I will tell you, I can really see, because what happens is the way that this works is like Cornelius will come in. Sometimes he sends one of his guys that works with him, and they sit and they stay, and they kind of are there to kind of help supervise and to kind of just be there to be a presence for the people that are there here, to go through the course, and you can really tell and see that they respect. And you can see that. And I see some struggle a little bit. Like I see little comments come out here and there, but you can really see the respect. And they really take it serious, and they really are there, and they are eager to learn. And what I've done is with this, when they come into me for this class, for the portion of the purpose of the class as they go through this program, is first of all, I give them an outlet really quick. We start with introductions, and they're always eager to tell their story. And I feel like it's important for those who are willing to share, and I always give them an out for those who want to keep their information private. What's your story? Because I want to make sure that I address everything. Because I have kind of a standard with this class. I cover a lot. I talk about the parameters. That how do you need to be able to legally purchase? Not only purchase, but then once you legally own a firearm, what's the law on transport? Right? What's the law on home storage? And so I kind of go through all of the law. We spend a lot of time talking about law. And then towards the end of the class, we use blue guns, we use dummy guns, we talk about safety, we talk about, all this stuff about safe and proper handling as well. But then, I let them kind of tell a little bit about their story, about what kind of got them to where they are. Yeah. And then I make sure that if there's something that I've not already covered in the law that applies to them and their situation, we talk about it. Because a lot of the times I will tell you, they really don't agree with their charge. They don't agree that they did anything wrong sometimes. And so it's an opportunity to have a discussion. And so we talk about it, and then you can just kind of see like lights come on sometimes, and so it's good.
And that's a perfect segue into this article. But I wanted to, frankly, for selfish reasons, I wanted to spend the last 2 minutes saying, hey, I've talked about systemic racism. I've reached out to the community. Because there are going to be people who, and through these efforts, I've gotten criticized by white people. I've gotten criticized by black people. I've had people threaten me, and so what I want to do is I wanted to spend a couple of minutes before we get deep into this conversation saying, hey, look, I've put my money where my mouth is. I've reached out to this, all the communities, but I've reached out to this community in a sincere and real way. This is not, I'm not just sitting back throwing stones or whatever. As we have this conversation, I want people to know that, hey, I've made a real sincere effort, that this is something that is meaningful to me.
Right.
I'm not just leveraging, this conversation in order to advance Second Amendment rights. I feel like there are way too many advocacy groups that don't really care as much about their subject as they do trying to get somebody from their party elected. Right. You know what I mean? And they go, hey, well, I'm going to use this community to further my, and that's not what I'm trying to do. Right. But anyway. So
and let me just say also, because when we was at the lab podcast, as you said, you reached out. And I really appreciate it because one thing you were saying, hey, I want to work with you. Anything I could do, we can do work together. Let's do it. Yeah. And I was really surprised because of everything I heard about Mike Schwartz. But I said, oh, okay. And
everything you heard about Mike Schwartz.
yeah. With on the other side, it's nothing nice, bro. But once I got to know you and you reaching out, I was like, okay, I think we can work together. And as I was sharing with you before, and I hope we can bring more people in to this space working with us as far as what we're trying to do in our community, because as I said before, working with, they don't call them gun control groups, but gun violence prevention groups.
Yeah.
On the other side, many times, trying to get laws to restrict, access to guns and possession of guns and things like that. They're, like you said, like you mentioned, they're the only ones that really come to the community and really want to work with us and help us and things like that. But our primary focus has always been what's going on in our community and how to get all these illegal guns out of our community so that we can save lives.
Right. Okay. So perfect. They are standing there in the trenches, shoulder to shoulder. I totally get it.
Yeah.
And that really, when you and I had that conversation, that shined a bright light, because I'm sitting here going, I don't get it. Like, they're advocating for laws that are putting folks in your community in jail longer, in jail, period. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm going, I don't get it. And I think it's important to understand, even if people are never going to agree with you and never going to, advocate, whatever, it's important to understand, like, where are they coming from? Like, what exactly is motivating them? So, okay, so here's the post. Let's talk about the actual study here. Here's what you wrote. Is it okay if I read?
Yeah.
Okay. Reflecting on the reality many black males face today, this article I recently read highlights the deep-seated reasons why some feel the need to carry guns for safety. It also brought me back to my own experience. Like many, I was introduced to firearms at a young age. At just 9 years old, I even held a hand grenade. The journey into understanding guns is complex. Often rooted in family tradition and societal realities, it's important for us to discuss these experiences and their impact on our communities. Read this article. Now, the article is it's a study. Young black males feel they need to carry guns for safety. And then there's actually there were a bunch of articles written. This is off of I want to get this right. It's Black Enterprise Wealth for Life, and it's a website. A new study recently published in the Delaware Journal of Public Health provides a candid look into the perspective of young black males in Houston, Baltimore, Jackson. In Houston, Baltimore, Jackson, Mississippi, and Wilmington. I think that's Jackson, Mississippi. I think it's Houston, Texas, Baltimore, Jackson, Mississippi, and Wilmington, Delaware. Yeah, okay. Locations often associated with violence. And that's an important thing, too, that we talk about exactly where this study was done.
Right.
Because I think there's a difference between black communities and the black community.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the black community encompasses every black American in the United States. It's very, very broad.
Exactly.
And there's
not monolithic. Yes.
Yeah. There's diversity, different experiences, different traditions, that sort of thing. A black community would be like a neighborhood that's predominantly black in a city somewhere.
Right.
And so I want to make sure that when we talk about these specific black communities, we're not necessarily talking about the black community.
Exactly.
You might have a totally different experience if you're black in San Diego.
Right. So, exactly.
According to WHYY, which is a news outlet, researchers at Texas Southern University, Delaware State University, Coppin State University, I hope I didn't get that wrong, Jackson State University, and Thurgood Marshall University conducted the study among black males between 15 and 24 who either recently owned or currently own firearms. And it was interesting, if anybody, men, women, black, white, doesn't matter, but 15 to 24, it's really hard to own a firearm legally from 15 to 17. There's a couple years there where it's like, how do they even get that? But we'll talk more about exactly what they mean by gun ownership and as we get into the study more. Their study, which is titled Understanding the Perception of Place and Its Impact on Community Violence, depicts that many of the black males who participated felt they needed a firearm for protection after they witnessed or experienced gun violence in their neighborhoods. These events often led to often led the participants to describe their cities in a negative light, most often using the terms, and man, these terms were crazy to me, Pastor.
Yes.
But direct quotes, this is how they described the cities they lived in. This isn't me or the researcher,
It's them.
It's
Young
them.
people, yeah.
Yeah, it's the 15 to 24-year-old black males. This is how they describe their community. Murder town, treacherous, crazy, chaotic, and a war zone.
Yes.
The respondents also described an early introduction to gun violence, some as young as 10, and many of them had guns introduced to them by family members. Their decision to carry a gun though shaped by social media pressures, limited economic opportunity, limited role models, and easy access to firearms in their communities were not made lightly nor in a vacuum. So let's just start there. Let's talk about that. No matter how old I am, 15 to 24 or 48.
Right.
If I'm living somewhere for whatever reason, if I have to live somewhere, I have no choice, but here's where I'm living, and I'm looking around and I describe it as a murder town or treacherous or crazy or chaotic or a war zone, then I'm going to make the decision to own a gun too.
Right.
It's interesting to me that when you cut through kind of the rhetoric and the political slogans, and the statistics that people can use to, prove any point they want, when you cut through all that, people understand, and maybe you disagree with me, but let me know. People understand that, hey, if you need to defend your life, the most effective tool to defending your life is a firearm. It's not a sword or a knife.
Right.
It's not harsh words.
Right.
It's not wrestling or jiu-jitsu.
Right.
If you're like, hey, I live in murder town and it's a war zone, and it's crazy and chaotic and treacherous, then the best way for me to defend myself is to own a gun. So I guess what I'm saying is, do you agree with that? And I don't know, do you blame them for wanting to own a gun?
Right. I would say yes. I agree. And, from a personal perspective, on my personal self, I wouldn't do that, right? And I could share later why I wouldn't do it. But I understand why folks in the black community, especially in these pockets where there's a lot of violence that's happening, where they would get a gun to feel safe, right? I have friends that legally have guns. My son-in-law, he possesses a gun. He can conceal in all of that, right? Yeah. And he goes places with me a lot of times. I don't know if he's packing or not, but at the same time, so I know that, in our community, people have these guns, right? But they have them legally. Yeah. And I don't have no problem with that if, I think they're responsible citizens. And that's the thing I think a lot of times people don't really understand when it comes to the black community, is that some of the most dangerous places is hardly dangerous at all. And what I mean by that is that it's a small group of people that are actually committing the violence. It's not the whole. I'm glad you made the distinction. It's not even when you're talking about a community. It's not that whole community. It's these few individuals that are making it seem like the whole community is unsafe. But I clearly understand why a black resident would want to get a gun, go get one. I mean, as long as you get it legally and things like that. So that's not the problem, but the problem for me would be these young men that would get access to that, whether they a family member, because you do have people, and I'm a former gang member myself, and I possessed a lot of guns and used them and so on. And so I do know that how guns get in our community, and many times they do get in our community because those that can legally purchase them, they will go buy those guns, scratch off the serial number. At least, that's what they used to do, and then sell them right into the streets and so on. And many times they break into homes. I broke into home and stole guns when I was young and so on. And then sometimes you would take them from someone, what have you, snatch the gun from somebody. So I've seen all those different type of things happen. So my thing with the residents is make sure you secure that gun when it's not in your control so that it doesn't get stolen and end up in the streets or in our community where a young person that doesn't have those life skills will use that on someone else. And the other part that I would say in regards to the young people that are carrying guns that feel that they have to do this because they feel unsafe. And I clearly understand that and the trauma that they're dealing with and everything. And one of the things that we deal with in our community now, we recognize and understand that, like, even illegally, right, these young men are not going to, from 15 to 24, and like you said, even 48, 49, 50, even older, those that cannot, because they have a felony, as you were speaking in your op-ed about, that have a felony and cannot possess a gun or what have you, they're still going to get one because of what you just mentioned about those communities. So we understand that these young people, 15 to 24, they're not giving up their guns, even if they're legal. So what we try to do is we try to get in there and teach them, right, and train them and show them how to manage their thinking so they can have more self-control, so that they don't just be going out there like a wild cowboy and just shooting, killing people and things like that. Yes, the ultimate objective is get people to do things legally and get them to get those guns out of their possession if they're illegal, because you can get arrested and you can go to jail and you can mess up your life that way. Yeah. And so we try to explain those things. But the main thing with that is what we're trying to do now is even if you don't want to give up your gun, we still want to help you to change your behavior and give you some life skills so that you can manage and control what you're doing when you have possession of that gun.
See, and that is in the next part, and that leads into the next part I wanted to talk about. Their decision to carry a gun, though shaped by social media pressures, limited economic opportunity, limited role models, and easy access to firearms in their communities, were not made lightly nor in a vacuum. And they talked about it in the study, how the conclusions they came to, one of the, there were a lot of things, basically exactly what they said, but they went real specific and talked about how the music they're listening to and the shows they're watching and the role models that they have is where they're getting this idea that violence is a viable option. But okay, so, and like you said, it's a very limited, so we're talking about a small group of people in a very few areas. So what's the danger? You know what I mean? Right. So who is looking to harm these folks? If you're a 15 to 24-year-old in this community and you're looking at your community and you're going, hey, this is chaotic. This is a war zone. This is, who are the people that are making it that?
Right. And I would say several people, right? But the main, what we deal with and what we've seen is that most time when there's gun violence in our community, it's either domestic or what you would call domestic violence, right? You can have a young person get into it with his girlfriend go get their brother, and this person could be one of those who are maybe involved in gangs, could be someone who have this violent, connected with our subculture, with the gangs and so on, have a violent mentality, and the way they know how to handle their problems is with a gun. And so you have that. You have, of course, these gang rivalries, and that's kind of where we find ourselves in the midst of fighting against and trying to prevent from happening, is the gang violence as it relates to guns, any type of violence. But we know that guns, like you said, it's the most effective weapon if you want to protect yourself and defend yourself and really take down someone. And then you also have individuals, when you talk about community gun violence, you have individuals that they don't know each other, but they get in an argument or whatever it may be, and then they both pull out guns and start shooting at each other. Many times when these incidents happen, and if you look at the reports that the police, when they give the reports and their press releases, these guys had illegal guns. And so that's kind of been the focus. But for the mass majority, when you talk about homicides and so on, you're really looking at, especially in the black community, you're looking at gangs. The last report I looked at, and I may be off a little bit. Hold on, I don't know why I thought I turned my phone off while we talk about this.
That's all right.
But when I've looked at one of the Sandak reports, and one of the things it talked about was homicides, right? Mm-hmm. And when you're looking at the black community, and when you talk about homicides, they say, okay, what was the motive behind this homicide? There was arguments and there was others and so on, but about 67% of those homicides was gang related, right, in the black community. And so that's why we know that a lot of the violence that's happening in our community, when you talk about homicides and shootings and things, is tied to gangs. But many times now what is happening, because, there is a lot of young people that age and younger and older that have possession of these illegal guns. And so many times it could be a gang member, but it's not a gang rivalry. He could have just gotten an argument with someone or as we were talking about, he dealing with his trauma and didn't feel safe and felt threatened and ended up shooting someone. It can be over drugs. It can be over a young lady. It could be many reasons, but a lot of times the nexus is this individual is involved in the gang, and that subculture of that gang activity and gang violence is tied to gun violence. And as you mentioned earlier, we're really dealing with a huge fight when you talk about trying to reduce gun violence with the hip hop community, the music and the entertainment. I think when you look on YouTube, when you look on social media, you look at all these different places, what is magnified and lifted up in the black community is not positive things, but negative things like that, like the hip hop and the drill music, talking about shooting and killing each other and things like that. And these young people, they see those things, right? And a lot of rivalries happen on social media and so on. And so in that report, when young people are saying they either saw their friend get shot or someone's getting shot at, and that's real. I talked to young people here. A young man I was working with, I think he's about 15, 16 years old. He got arrested for having a ghost gun. And I was asking him, why you have this ghost gun? He said, well, me and my friend, we got shot at and he got shot. So he said, I went in, he said, very easy for me to do it. I went and he said, I had 2 ghost guns. He said it was so easy, I thought it was legal for me to have the guns. And he got arrested with one, they didn't get the other. But he said that when I got these guns, I said, okay, let somebody run up on me now. Now he did say, now, I don't know if I would have shot him or not, he said, but that's what my mindset was back then, and so on. So it's actually true. A lot of these individuals young people are carrying these guns because they don't feel safe, right? And the reason why they don't feel safe is because of all the violence that you see. You can be mistaken, right, for if you live in a certain community and someone got shot on the other side of town and they come to get revenge, if you just look like you belong to that community and that gang over there, they will shoot you and they will kill you. I've seen that happen many times. So you have these sometimes where it's not targeted. It's targeted but not targeted because they're not getting the right person. Sometimes people that get shot, many things that happen, these individuals are not even in the gang. And so I think a lot of times because so much gang violence happen in our community, when we look at that, many times, at least the outer community and within our community, people begin to think that every person that gets shot or killed in our community, it was because of gangs, which many times it may not be. The person may not was in a gang, could have been an argument. One of the person probably was a gang member, but it was an argument that had nothing the motive was not gang related. It was an argument, or it was over drugs, or it was over a young lady.
See, I want, because when there's some kind of mass murder and somebody with a gun goes and shoots up a whatever, they'll talk about like video games, like, hey, there's violent video games, violent computer games that it's good to play. And I always think to myself, come on, that's not. I'm just not buying it. I don't think that the difference between this person shooting up a mall or a movie theater or whatever, and not is the fact that he played some kind of computer game where there was violence. And I've wondered, you talked about the hip hop community and music community, entertainment community in general. I got to tell you, a few years ago, and I've wondered, like, how much can we actually blame them? Are they is art imitating life, or is life imitating art? Or
Both.
Maybe it's a little bit of both, right? Yeah. But we were fighting hard a few years ago to keep the gun show at the Del Mar Fairgrounds.
Oh yeah, I know about that.
And the Del Mar Fairgrounds, the gun show had an impeccable safety record. You couldn't purchase a firearm without going through a background check and a 10-day wait period. It was a really great event for, I'd been going for at least 15 years. It'd been there for 30 years. And again, an impeccable legal and safety record. So right in the middle of that, we were getting protested and people were coming and, hey, all this gun violence, we have to reduce gun violence, so get rid of this gun show. And at the same time, they had some kind of rap. I forget who it was. I'm just kind of remembering this as we're talking, but it was some kind of rap or hip hop artist who had a show there, and there was a shooting. And I thought, well, where's the moms demand action? Like we're still going to allow hip hop and rap shows? Like they don't have an impeccable, legal record. They don't have an impeccable safety record. But here we're getting rid of gun shows, and we're not addressing, this is just some kind of random problem and we'll solve it, but it's a one-off. Meanwhile, you have this gun show that hasn't caused any problems at all. And you have, this long line of protesters. And I think broadly, Pastor, it feels like you have a bunch of people in Escondido and Santee and San Marcos and Carlsbad, who are, who feel like the fingers are getting pointed at them.
Gotcha.
Where, there are communities, very small pockets of communities in San Diego that where the violence is happening. And it's like, well, wait a minute. They're committing crimes and they're breaking into houses to steal guns so that they can shoot people as the result of an argument, or some kind of illegal drug activity. And so I have to give up more of my rights and freedom. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like how are we off? Is that not the right way to think about it? I mean, is it relatable or?
I would say, and I think this is probably where the clash comes when you talk about laws. Maybe it shouldn't be a law, but there most definitely should be some type, just like this paper that was done on young black men not feeling safe. Some type of research should be done, because when you talk about the what was it at the fair?
The gun. It was some kind of
gun show.
Yeah, it was a gun show, and
they sell guns there. So one of the things that I hear all the time, and I talk with this one professor I know, Dr. Sid Martinez. I don't know if you heard of him, but when they do their research and when they look at things many times, they say that one of the problems that we have is that when you have these gun shows, there's no way to track these guns, right? To see, and when individuals are buying these guns, where are they going, right?
And they all. So I want to be totally clear, because I can already feel my listeners yelling at their, you know what I mean?
Where to go?
So I want to be crystal clear, and this is something that we brought up a lot. Is every single process and procedure that you have to go through to purchase a gun at a gun shop, it's the exact same thing at a gun show.
So you can track them.
So absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So if you're at a gun show and you walk up to a table and say, "Hey, I want to buy this gun," then you still have to go through a dealer, a federally licensed dealer. You can't walk away with the gun that day. You have to go through a 10-day wait period. You have to go through a background check. So the exact same laws that apply to gun shops apply to these gun shows. Okay. It's almost as if, in fact, it's very similar to just taking all the gun shops and saying, "Hey, for this weekend, you guys are going to set up here at this gun show."
Gotcha.
So it's the exact same. It's the exact same. But it's just that, like I said, the contrast where you had a bunch of people, protesting and blaming. Meanwhile, I'm going to this gun show for 15 years, 5 times a year for 15 years. And I'm seeing my friends and we're hugging each other and we're saying, "Hey, check this new thing out and this new whatever and how you been and let's go get a hot dog." It's an event, it's a community event, right? And then they're going, "Well, you guys are bad. You're undesirable. You can't be. You're causing a problem, and so we're going to get rid of you, but we're still going to have this music show where they talk about killing people, they talk about hurting people, and oh, by the way, there was a shooting." And I'm going, "Well, wait a minute. I'm not the problem, So, but that being said, that doesn't mean I don't want to be part of the solution.
Right.
It's just that, blaming me, that's not, I'm not, taking things away from me and blaming me. It can't be part of the solution.
Especially if we're not talking to each other and sitting down and working things out to figure out what's to be the best approach. Because, when I think about the gun shows and so on, so I'm glad you brought that point out, because the next thing I wanted to address was, then we need researchers. I don't know if you all have done it before or you have the data, but track and see, where are the guns coming from that's in our community, right? Where you have all these illegal guns, people being killed. Because I know Dr. Sid Martinez, several years ago, he did a study because he was focused on gangs. He was focused on them being arrested and like shootings, homicides, and the firearm that they had. And so he drove around with SDPD and Escondido. He went to the district attorney's office, looked at the data and so on. And what he concluded is that 50 to 60%, no, I think he said 60 to 70% of guns that gang members got arrested with and had used had come from either a residential burglary or from a family or friend of someone that had legally had a gun, and somehow they got that gun in the community. Right.
Sure.
And then he said 30 to 40% came from other states or other areas where there was more, because California has strict gun laws, had more lax laws and so on. So that was his conclusion on it. So with me, when I looked at the report, especially with the work that we're doing, is how do we stop these illegal guns from coming into our community, right? And I think, like, you know, there has to be accountability on both sides, right? Accountability on our side, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do is hold these young men accountable, right, for their actions, but also trying to work with them to change their behaviors. But I think also, like, with the gun owners, right? The gun owners, those who are following the law, like you were just saying, not doing anything wrong, hold those accountable that may not be following that same principle, right? So there has to be accountability on both sides, because if not, at least from my position of the work that I do in the community, you're still going to have guns being flooded into our community. I think you do raise a good point, and I think that's important, right? When you talk about, because the thing I was thinking when you're talking about gun shows versus, you know, a gun store, right? Both of them selling guns legally and following all the laws and so on. So that really can't be the problem. Yeah. The problem has to be how do we track and find out how these guns, who are the legal dealers or those who are trying to use this fair system for their advantage and so on. I think that's kind of what my focus would be.
Yeah, and I don't even think I would go so far as to say, like, gun shows, for example. By the way, we lost that gun show. It's gone. It's been gone for years, you know? And it's like, well, I don't even think, not only was it not a problem, I think that it was in some ways, you know, a solution. You know, but it was chipped away at. And I want to talk about, let's kind of talk about, and I think this part of the conversation is tough, but I want to have it. And
let's do it.
I want to talk about percentages, you know, because if it was just, I think if the only thing we were dealing with were storage laws, then I don't even know if San Diego County Gun Owners or Gun Owners Radio would even exist. You know what I mean? That was the only thing we were dealing with. But we're talking about full-on bans on what you can own and where you can carry and the magazines you can have. And I'm watching people, I'm hearing from people, Pastor, who are calling me up. I'm talking about grown men who have jobs, have zero criminal history, and they're calling me up in tears going, I need an attorney. I was doing something totally normal. Yeah. I was doing something totally normal in 49 other states. You know what I mean? I wasn't hurting anybody or whatever, but I've run afoul of some law that only exists in California, and I think my life is ruined. And, you know, and they'll, like, suddenly they're becoming a felon. You know, suddenly they're having to take their entire life savings and pay some attorney just so they can stay out of jail. You know what I mean? And that's really, really difficult. So it's more than just like, well, gee, Mike, you can't have your cool toys anymore. Boo-hoo. No, I'm watching lives get ruined. I'm watching people, you know. So let's talk about percentage. I'll tell you where I'm going here. Let me read a little bit of this report. The young men we interviewed shared similar perceptions of living in cities characterized by crime and violence. Over 2/3 of our study participants described their cities as a negative social environment with few opportunities. When asked to describe their city, single-word responses such as violent, dangerous, crazy were typical. Wilmington, frequently referred to as murder town. We talked a little bit about this. The young men told us that people in the city were, quote, angry and miserable, end quote. And comments such as, if you say the wrong thing, you're dead. And that's the end of that, end quote. Underscored the sense of danger that permeates their everyday lives. I think that I've been, by following like your Facebook page, getting to know you, following folks that do the same kind of advocacy work in your community, it's definitely opened my eyes, and I realize that you guys have legitimate complaints in areas, you know, and I've realized that people grow up, even though we're both Americans, we both grew up in the United States. People grew up in very different situations.
Yes.
And you know, I guess my question is, with that in mind, you know, and the idea of systemic racism or racism, and you know how it's caused, it still causes problems today. The fact that there's a history of slavery and Jim Crow laws and all that, I'm convinced that. I've been convinced that you're right. There is an impact. Here's my question, and I don't know how to frame it any more plainly than this. I don't think it's 100% of the problem.
Right.
But I've been convinced it's not 0% of the problem.
Right.
So with this kind of response, where they say that, you know, if you do the wrong thing, you're dead, and that's that. You know, where they describe their towns as a war zone, et cetera, et cetera. These towns, it's not like you're seeing, you know, NRA members turning their towns into this. It's not like you're seeing, you know, white racists, you know, riding through town and they've turned their town. You know what I mean?
Right.
So if it's not 100% and it's not 0%, and you know, the gun owners, legal gun owners, we're not out there, you know, hurting people, you know, but their towns are still, you know, turning their experience into this horrible thing. Where, you know, is it 90%, you know, racism? Is it 10%? Like, you know what I mean? Like, how much is it this horrible legacy of racism and slavery, and how much is it like personal responsibility? Like, this is your community, you know, your folks have turned this into your community, and that's harsh to say, but I think it's something that's on the mind of folks who can't relate to it at all.
Right.
You know, we grew up, you know, in a totally different environment, and now, you know, like I said, people are saying, hey, this gun show that you like to go to, you know, it's dangerous. This hobby or this thing that you do where you own a gun and you want to carry, you know, you're part of the problem. You know what I mean? Like, fingers are pointed at us. You know, but meanwhile we're going, well, we're not even the ones there. It's not our community. We're not there. We're not doing it. So what, you know, what percentage? What, you know, can you label? Can you come up with a percentage? Or I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that is intertwined, and when you talk about personal responsibility, first thing that came to my mind is a shared responsibility, right? Yeah. Yes, first with our own community. When you talk about the black community and us, stop killing each other, right? We in our community, we don't like to use black on black crime because we believe that's even a term that was kind of framed by those who might be racist or racism, right? To use that term because you don't use it on any other race as far as when it's intra-related homicides and so on.
But I think, and I don't mean to interrupt, but you know what? I think it's a good point. I don't know if it was caused by racism. I don't know that. I mean, maybe it was. Right. And if you say it was, I believe you. But I know that when I've heard it used, it's to illustrate. It's almost a defense mechanism from folks in my community, or you know, the gun community, where we're going, wait. It's I'm not. No, this is black on black. I'm not black. Right. You know what I mean? It's kind of a defense mechanism. Right. You know, we don't want to harm anybody. We certainly don't want to harm anybody in the black community. Right. So the way I've seen people use the term black on black is not an attempt to be racist or even to lay blame. It's to defend, like, and say, hey, please don't blame me. I want to be part of the, you know, the solution. Right. You know, I don't want to be labeled as part of the problem. Right. You know, I don't know.
What, and I hear what you're saying. I understand that. I think that, you know, when you talk about blacks killing blacks, it's most definitely shared responsibility. We have to, like, you know, take care of our own community first and make sure that we're doing what we need to do. But there is, it's not like back in the Jim Crow and things like that, but we're still dealing with systems, right? And I think your op-ed, brilliantly, spelled that out and made it clear how we're dealing with this, right? And so when you talk about systemic racism, structural racism, individual racism, whatever type of racism you want to look at when it comes to our community, and you're dealing with being marginalized, you're dealing with, to a certain degree, a sense of oppression and things like that, I believe it plays a major role from I don't know what percentage when you talk about percentages, but one of the things that we can do and we can look at, and I think you spelled it out clearly, we can look at the prisons, right, and see who's locked up and who's there, right? Black people are not the only people that commit crimes, but most of the time it's our community that's over police. And even I've talked to individuals that are white and grew up in white communities, right? And they even told me, like, hey, the way blacks are treated in their community and the way they're stopped and the way their cars are searched and things like that for these, what you would say, illegal guns or what have you, you have the same thing going on in the white community, but they're not like doing the same thing to that degree. I know they're doing it because I got an argument with Chief Nislife when he was chief about that. Because we go everywhere. We arrest them out in La Jolla, everywhere else if they have illegal guns. And so, but one of the folks, when you look at the data, when you look at the stats, black people are overwhelmingly arrested, overwhelmingly put in county jail. We only make up 5 to 6% in the region and the city of San Diego, but yet it's somewhere between 28% of folks in the jails. You have almost I believe 30-something% 20-something% of blacks in the state prison, where they only make up about 6% of the population. So when you look at that, even on a national level, right, almost 50% of folks, 50% of folks in prison are black. So we know that, and not saying that they don't deserve to be there, right? I do know that people do get arrested. They get life in prison for things that they didn't do. I know people right now in prison for some things that they didn't do. So we do know that a lot of time that these arrests, the over-policing of our communities is tied into our race and systemic racism and the history of that. Like you went to slavery and Jim Crowism and so on and so forth. A lot of times when new laws come in, and I think you made a good point because back then she was our council member Montgomery Stepp. Yeah. And now she's county board of supervisor. That was one of the issues she raised when we talk about safe storage and things like that. She had is like, we want to make sure that whatever laws are passed on this, that it's not going to be primary focus in our community a lot. Even when we had that conversation about the gun violence restraining order, right, and so on. And, and I reached out to city attorney. I want to know, with this, why so many black people are being arrested for this and so on and so forth. And they said they just following the complaints, not so much singing out people and so on. But we know that when you talk about systems, it's all tied together, right? When you talk about guns, the lack of resources in our community, and the marginalization of our community, the education system is failing our young people and so on. But I think that even though you have all these issues that's tied into race, we do have a responsibility, ourselves as black people, shared responsibility to work together to heal our community and do for ourselves. But at the same time, we're all Americans. So what I would say when we talk about that shared responsibility, I don't expect no one else to care for me unless I care for myself. But when we do that, like you reached out, it's a shared responsibility, so let's work together also in our comeback and our fight for that. But not only that, but let's have this conversation like we're having and continue to have those conversations, because I learned, right? I had big issues with SDPD and law enforcement, but I would sit down and have these conversations with them, and I learned things from them, right? They would share things, even about safe storage and things. Yeah. I would talk to them about, so what do you think about this? Is this good? Is this bad? Or what would you want to do? And things like that. And a lot of times their thing is that, at least some of the ones I talked to, is that people are not going to report it if the gun was stolen and it wasn't safely stored and things like that, because I think you have to report it or to be a crime and things like that. So but the point is, I listen and I want to learn, right? I don't know everything. And you're the expert when it comes to dealing with gun ownership and the Second Amendment and things like that. And I'm just the expert in dealing with my community and knowing that, we have a lot of violence, we have a lot of homicides, we have a lot of crime that's happening in our community. And a lot of this is tied into personal responsibility and the way a person make decisions. That's why we go to these individuals to get them to start taking responsibility and to think for themselves and to move from negative behavior to positive behavior. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. And especially when you talk about these young people. But the thing of it is, and what I would say to your listeners and everyone is that we lack the resources to really, even our program, right, or what we're trying to do, because we're dealing with poor people. We don't have a lot of resources in our community, and we don't have a lot of funding and different things like that comes to our community to help us to be able to do these things. And our website, you can go to www.shafat.org, and you'll see the data on the No Shots Fired program of all the things that we have done to disrupt violence, all the things we've done to help people change their lives around, right? So our program is effective and it works, right? But the main thing about it is that we lack those resources, right? And so that's part of the problem. Then the other thing I would say, at least with San Diego, the struggle that we have in really trying to make a dent into this crime and this violence and so on, is that San Diego's a pretty safe city. Yeah. And so when you're going for statewide or federal grants or what have you, they looking at Baltimore.
Yeah, right.
They looking at these other places. Oh, we need, and then my thing is you pouring all these resources in, but you're still having the same problem. Yeah. Why don't you look at programs that are effective and making things happen and continue to support them so they can continue? At least I think they earned it, right? And I'm not saying neglect that, but I think too much resources being poured into these communities, and yet you still have the same problem. Even with Chicago, you got a lot of resources being poured into that community, but you still have the problem there. Even though certain programs or certain communities there, they have helped and made some difference and some changes, but overall, so all I'm saying is that when you have a program that works, and when you have a program that's effective, right, and has demonstrated that they can reduce gun violence, why not look at that program as a model, and why not support that program so we can continue to do that and then help other cities and other states?
Well, because, by the way, the op-ed that you're referring to summarize the op-ed I wrote, was that California has a disproportionate number of gun laws, than other states. And those disproportionately, those gun laws are used disproportionately against black and brown men under 40.
Right.
And that what the result is that they are being prosecuted for gun crime way more often. Yes. And they're being and their sentences are being extended, and it's ruining the community. Yes. And that is the exact. Whether you believe in systemic racism or not, that's the exact definition of systemic racism.
Right.
So when they talk about systemic racism, they're talking about exactly that.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot, and I hear it all the time myself. I know there's a lot of people that will say that, right? It's not racism, it's individual choice. And I believe it's both, but I don't want to blame racism, right? I don't want to blame that. We know those issues are there. They've been there for a good while, but what has been done, right, with all what they do to address these issues, or what has really been done to help our community. So I really believe that we have to do it for ourselves in our own community, and we are doing it, right? And like I said before, we just it's a shared responsibility, so we need more support.
Well, I think that one of the problems with getting more support is that you won't get more support from like half the county, because they view it as they're trying to take my gun rights away.
Got you.
You know what I mean? And I think that is there a way, can we give lectures on how to start a business, how to maintain a business? Is there a lecture on how to get into the trades and get a better, I don't know, what I mean? Some kind of economic help, some kind of mentorship, some kind of program that has absolutely nothing to do with guns, And the folks who are standing, side by side, who are for, more restrictive gun laws. Mm-hmm. I call them anti-gunners. Maybe they don't like that. They probably don't. But the groups that, that are there working with you who want more restrictive gun laws, if they're sincere, then great. If they're still helping the community, you know what I mean? Like if they're helping the community by doing these non-gun related, ways of helping, then they'll pitch right in and do it too.
Right.
If they're not sincere, they're going, well, wait a minute, we're really just reaching out to you because you help us ban more guns.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
You know, but
good point.
There has to be, if we've identified that there are a small number of communities that have this huge problem, and that the problem isn't the average gun owner,
right.
you know, and that the problem really isn't necessarily guns, you know, that the problem is that that they're solving problems. According to this report, they're solving problems in very unhealthy and horrible, dangerous ways. They're making a living in illegal and horrible, dangerous ways. You know, if that's the problem, then let's go solve that problem rather than say, hey, you know what we're going to do is we're going to go make sure that, you know, when somebody does break into a gun owner's house, that they have to, you know, not only do they have to get through the lock on the door, but they also got to get through a safe or whatever. You know what I mean? Like wait a minute, like let's actually try to solve the problem. It feels like we're not going after, you know, what really needs to happen here. You know, it feels like this gun issue has kind of been dumped in your lap, you know, and it like you said, the vast majority of homicides, you know, where gang members, that sort of thing in your community, I'm sure there's a gun used. You know, I'm positive that's the truth. So it makes sense that they'd they'd home in, you know, in on your issue and, you know, whatever. But it feels like that there is a real solution out there that isn't being as that isn't being attacked as hard as it could be. I mean, I think that if I talked to 100 gun owners and said, hey, we want to go help these folks who are going to grow up to be gang members or whatever, we want to help them avoid that, I think they'd be all for it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They'd say, great, let's do that. There's a group called Boys to Men that we support.
I heard about them.
With Joe Sigurdsson, where he tells me 80% of the people that go through his program don't have a dad.
Yeah.
And that they're just angry young boys.
Yeah.
You know, they're angry teenagers. They're just angry.
Yeah.
They don't even know why.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
And I'm a big supporter of that. I don't know. What do you think, man? What is a path going forward?
Yeah, you know, for sure. Let me say this, is that when I'm in my community and when we're addressing gangs and gun violence and so on, never once will you hear come out of my mouth, it's the gun owners' problem, right? We know what the problem is, and we focus on that problem. Yeah. And the problem is the individuals with those guns. I think that, you know, the gun itself is not going to take somebody's life, but I do believe that if you get the wrong person and have a gun in their hand, right, that's where life can be lost. So we have to address both, not from the perspective of taking gun owners' guns, because that's not, if you have a gun, I don't care what kind it is, I'm not trying to take, I don't want to fight to take your gun from you. I want you to be safe and have your gun. But what I do want, though, is I want to keep and prevent these illegal guns, wherever they're coming from, into my community. But I also want to deal with the individual, right, to help them to change their life and turn their life around, to not, what's the motive, right? Why do you think you need a gun? And we know what they don't feel safe and things like that. I grew up in that community. I'm a former gang member myself. I was a part of, we started a lot of I was there when the gun violence started. We started all that violence that's happening in our community now. And that's why I'm trying to come back and give back, is because I understand that culture. I was a part of that culture of violence and so on. God saved me and changed my life around December 5th, 1984. So I've been out of it for a good while. I was 22 years old, so I was within that range. Wow. I was 22 years old when I actually got out of the gang lifestyle and so on. And so now I'm trying to go back to help our young people to change their life. And so some of the things that I pointed out in regards to what our program do, that's how you make the difference. I think what you brought up is important too, right? When you talk about trades, and when you talk about economics and things like that, and we collaborate with, my son has an organization called Core 6, and that's one of the things that they do. They do entrepreneurships, and they work with people on manage their finances and so on, and so and into investments and things like that. So we got these things happening and going on in our community and things like that. But it's small in scope, right? Because of the resources that you need. So just like you would support the Red Cross or Blue Cross or one of these huge organizations, I would like to see some of these celebrities funnel, instead of these huge organizations all the time, funnel that money down to organizations that's grassroots, that's really with boots on the ground, that's out there trying to make these things happen and so on.
Actually solve the problem.
Yeah, exactly. But we're not, and I want to make that clear. I know some groups are that way, but I'm not here to take or try to even get a law passed to take guns from any gun owner. I got friends, I got family members that legally have guns, right, and possess those guns and so on. The only reason why I don't have a gun is because I was part of the violence and all the trauma. I'm just too scared to have one. But that's just me as an individual choice that I made. But I have a lot of people, even friends who have felonies and so on. They still have guns. So the thing of it is, you're not going to a certain degree, be able to get all these guns out of our community. I had another chief to tell me that he said there's so many guns in our community, even if you just made a law that no one can have guns anymore, it ain't going to do anything. It's not going to make no bit of difference.
I would, people like me would give up my gun, you know what I mean? Because I follow the law, and I'm not out there hurting anybody, which is, but now I'm left vulnerable.
Right, exactly.
Well, I thought this was super interesting. Pastor, I appreciate you very much. And I very much appreciate you coming in and giving me the time and the discussion. I wanted to really talk about this study because I think that there was so much more to the study. They put this big scary gun on the front of the study and pretend,
I saw that.
You know what I mean? And
I saw that.
This study is so much more than just guns, but guns are a hot topic and draws attention. But anyway, I very much appreciate you coming in and talking to me, man. And I appreciate everything that you do for your community. And let's keep talking, because I would love to figure out more that we can do that doesn't compromise our principles and our beliefs, but does help San Diego,
right?
And helps what you're trying to accomplish.
Absolutely, and I know that you have your trolls out there, right, on both sides,
right?
And I understand that, but I would say that besides that, I think that like when you mentioned the gun on there, that's a trigger for both sides, right?
Right.
Because one is, hey, you try to take my gun, you try to put this thing, look at this is the problem, and then the other is saying, no, this is the problem.
Right.
And so it's a trigger for all sides. But I think that if we can really, really, really try to understand each other, learn from each other, right?
Yeah.
And find a medium to where that we can work together. And so I believe we can, because we've already been working together and doing some things, and I believe we can do
successfully,
more. Right. And that was one of the things that I was thinking in regards to when you were talking about coming in doing some type of economic class, things like that. We have these seasons of peace where we do a lot of education in our community and community empowerment. And whatever topic you think is needful that our community needs to hear, whether it's about guns or what have you, we can have set up a platform where you can come in and do that education and do that training piece or what needs to be done.
You have my commitment. We'll talk and we'll figure it out.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. All right, great. Pastor, thank you.
What's
the website one more time?
www.shaphat, SHAPHAT.org.
Okay, fantastic.
Cornelius?
Yeah.
If I could just have a moment real quick.
Sure.
I've seen you work with these men and women. I just want to commend you and thank you for what you're doing, because I see you have a heart, you have a talent. It's not just a job.
Thank you.
I think you're doing amazing work.
Thank you. And thank you for all you do, too.
Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, we have another guest here that we're going to talk about, so I'm gonna say goodbye, and thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you, Cornelius. Appreciate you, bud. And I'll talk to you very, very soon.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming and opening yourself up like this. So, thank you. And you can go right out that door there. So, I'll talk to you soon. Have a good Happy New Year, okay?
Thank you.
All right, man.
I'll check you all out. This one?
Yep. And then just walk right down that aisle. There you go. All right, that was interesting. I enjoyed that conversation very, very much. I think that was a good conversation to have, and it's not the end. It's not the end of the conversation, and hopefully it will continue to be a fruitful effort, which it already has been. But I really, truly have for those listening, and I'm going to introduce my next guest here in just a minute, and I'm looking forward to talking to him. But I really, truly have had folks threaten me, call me up, send me emails and voicemails and texts and emails and, you name it, threats from both sides, from people who don't want me to talk to black people and from black people who don't want me to reach out to their community. I mean, it's been ridiculous. I'm at the point where I just don't care. I'm going to continue to do the right thing. Because I think it is the right thing to do. And I think that the more we have conversations that are honest and open and unafraid, I think the better we're going to do. And, helping with the community and helping specifically Pastor Bowser, that's something that I want to do for the Second Amendment. But I also, I just think it's being a good person. I think it's just being a respectable individual. There are problems. Is it in the community that I grew up in? No, it's not. I can't really relate to, what they're experiencing, but that doesn't mean I don't want to help. So, I'm passionate about the Second Amendment. I've dedicated my entire life to it. I've dedicated my professional life to it. And so that's certainly one of the big motivators, but it's not the only motivator.